Spooky Halloween Stories. The Hitchhiker. A man moved to a small town and slowly got to know a few of his new neighbors. He soon learned that most of the residents believed that one of the roads out of town was haunted, but he didn't believe in ghosts, so he never asked why. One day, the man went to visit a friend in another town. He was enjoying his visit so much that he ended up staying later than he had planned. By the time he left for home, it was way past midnight. There was no moon that night, and once he left the town limits, the only lighting came from his headlights. Soon, it began raining, and the rain made it even more difficult to see. As a result, it was almost too late to brake when the man saw the woman on the road. He jammed his foot hard to the floor, and the car swerved in the road before coming to a stop, just inches from her legs. Normally, the man would have driven off again, but it was so late and the weather was terrible. He decided to offer the woman a ride. She got into his car, took off her wet hoodie, and held her hands up to the vents to capture the warmth. When they reached town, the woman directed him to her home, thanked him for the ride, and went inside. When the man got home, he discovered that he had left her hoodie in his car. He thought about driving back to her house, but it was so late that he decided to go inside to bed and return the hoodie the next day. The next morning, he drove back to the house where he had dropped her off, walked to the door and rang the doorbell. An older woman answered the door and he handed her the hoodie. "I gave your daughter a ride home last night and she left this in my car," he said. The woman began to cry. "My daughter was killed by a hit-and-run driver many years ago," she said. "It happened on a road into town, and she was wearing a hoodie just like this one." The 13th floor. The first hotel to have more than 13 floors had a huge Halloween party to celebrate its opening. Each floor was set up like a maze, decorated with cobwebs and other Halloween decorations. There were lots of people dressed up as ghosts and ghouls to frighten the partygoers. An exciting prize was hidden on the top floor, and the first person to reach the prize would win it. Jack and Sophia were two of the partygoers. They worked their way easily through the mazes on the first few floors. As they ended up through the building, the hallways on each floor got darker and scarier. When they got to the 12th floor, Jack and Sophia heard a blood-curdling scream. As they made their way through the maze, they heard more screams and cries for help. Finally, in the lobby by the elevators, they saw blood dripping from the ceiling. The elevator dinged and the doors opened slowly, which was strange because every other time they'd be smooth and quick. The light in the elevator was flickering as they stepped in, and as the doors began to close, the lights went out completely, and then screams so loud the entire building heard them. At first, the partygoers thought it was part of the scary Halloween theme, but then the owners of the building turned on all the lights and asked everyone to return to the lobby. But when people tried to use the elevator, it never came. The bell would ding, the doors wouldn't open, and they were all forced to use the stairs. Down in the lobby, the building owners explained they had not played the sounds of the screams, and as they did a check of everyone who had come back, they realized Jack and Sophia had not returned. Just then, the doors to the elevator opened. It was empty except for Jack's watch, one of Sophia's shoes, and a pool of blood. Jack and Sophia were never seen again, and the building owners took away the button for the 13th floor, so nobody would disappear there again. Clap once for yes. A family was camping and left their tent to go on a day hike. They were a few hours from their campsite when a storm suddenly blew up. They tried to trace their steps back to the campsite, but became lost in the unfamiliar backcountry. Being experienced hikers, they knew once they were lost, it was best to stay in one place than wander in the woods, so they prepared to settle down and wait for rescue. Darkness fell, and the family built a fire to keep warm. As they snuggled up against each other and started to drift off to sleep, they heard a noise coming from the trees. "Who's there?" one of the parents called, but there was no answer. Then they heard the sound again, but once more when they called out, there was no answer. it's someone who can't speak," suggested the daughter. So her mum called out, "Is there anyone there?" Clap once for yes and twice for no. There was one clap. "You were right," the parents said to their daughter. "There is someone out there." "Are you here to rescue us?" shouted the mum. Clap, clap. "Are you lost like us?" Clap, clap. "Do you live out here in the woods?" Clap, clap. "Let me try," said the son. "Are you a boy?" Clap, clap. "Are you a girl?" Clap, clap. They all looked at each other puzzled. Thinking he was being funny, the son asked, "Are you human?" Clap, clap. Now the family was scared. "Are you alone?" called the mum. Clap, clap. The family huddled together more. "How many of you are there then?" Clap, 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 clap. Hide and seek. Two sisters were spending the summer at their grandparents' house. When the sun was shining, they had plenty of fun, swimming in the lake out front, exploring the woods out back, and playing all sorts of games in the gardens. However, one week toward the end of their stay, it did nothing but rain. The girls had played board games, read books, made things with their craft supplies, and now they were bored. The grandparents' house was large, and the girls thought it would be an excellent place for a game of hide and seek. The younger sister wanted to hide first. She ran off to find a hiding place, while her sister covered her eyes and began to count to 50. The older sister heard her siblings' footsteps running up the stairs and along the hallway to the back of the house. After reaching 50, she opened her eyes and went in search of her sister. The girl went into every room. She looked under the beds and in the closets, behind the curtains and behind the doors, but her sister was nowhere to be found. Finally, she reached the only room their grandparents had told them never to enter. She reached out and grasped the doorknob, turning it slowly and pushing the door open. Much to her surprise, the room was almost empty. The only item was an old, tall, carved wooden cupboard, covered in cobwebs. But the door was slightly open. The girl ran over laughing and swung the door open, expecting to find her sister. But the cupboard was empty. She leaned in, and as she did, a cold, icy hand reached out from the back of the dark cupboard and grabbed her wrist. She let out a scream and tried to escape, but the hand started to pull her into the cupboard. The girl's sister heard her screams and ran to find out what was happening. She entered the room and looked on in horror as her sister began to disappear into the closet. Luckily, the little sister was quick thinking. She ran towards the cupboard and grabbed her sister's legs. After a brief tug of war, she managed to pull her sister out of the cupboard, and the two girls ran from the room, slamming the door behind them. Daddy's home. A man and his young teenage son lived together in a small house on the outskirts of town. The lot their house sat on was large and overgrown with tall hedges blocking the house from the street. One day, the man left on an overnight business trip but took his son's phone charger by mistake. As a result, neither the boy nor his father would charge their phones. Both phones were fully charged at first, but the man was delayed on his way home, and by midnight on the second day, both phones were dead. It was just after this the boy had heard a knock on the front door. He was a sensible boy and knew not to open the door to strangers. Instead, he looked out of his bedroom window onto the drive to see who was there. The boy saw his father's car in the drive, but he could not see the front door from his room. He went downstairs and looked through the peephole in the door to see who was there. He could see his father on the other side of the door, looking back at him, and the boy reached up to open the door. But something stopped him. "Dad?" the boy called out. "Why are you knocking on the door? Did you forget your keys?" The boy waited, but there was no reply. Just another knock on the door. "Dad?" the boy called out again. "Why don't you just open the door and come in?" But again there was no reply. Instead, there was just a steady, rhythmic knocking on the door, which began to get faster and faster. The boy's dad was knocking constantly on the door, waiting for him to open up when suddenly he stopped, and there was no sound at all. The boy looked through the peephole again. His dad was still there, so he decided to open up. When he opened the door, he discovered his dad's head taped to the door in front of the peephole and a trail of bloody footprints leading down the drive.